Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, mama. I know I act the fool, but I promise I'm going back to school. It's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe Comics podcast. If you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website, talkingjoe.co.uk. And of course, if you know about us already, like and subscribe, say good things about us, help those algorithms. We have concluded our look at the Frontline series. So we are back looking at the main Devil's Due series, which picks up with G.I. Joe issue 26. Scott Sturgis is a reasonable man. From Devil's Due in 2004. This issue marks the beginning of what I would call the Brandon Jerwa era of G.I. Joe as he takes the reins as the solo writer on the main book. But I will not be talking about this alone, so let me introduce my co-hosts and switching the order for comic effect. First up is a reasonable man. It's G.I. J. Cordray.
Howdy, Joe fans. I don't know about that reasonable Joe or that reasonable man part, but we'll go with it. Hope everybody's ready to talk comics.
And also joining us is an unreasonable man. It's Tim Finn. He's not really.
Hello listeners, and hello Mark, and hello Jay. I'm stumbling because I want to say something hilarious about reasonable and unreasonable, but I got nothing.
It's tough. We don't have a lot of prep time.
It's a reasonable reaction, ironically. So we are sneaking behind the curtain. We're recording not too far after New Year's. We've had a little break for Christmas. So it's been a couple of weeks since we last talked. So good to be back on the line with you guys again. Hope you had a pleasant and peaceful and or exciting Christmas period, whichever is preferable for you.
Yes. Peaceful and exciting. Both were good and preferable.
Did you get G.I. Joe related things underneath the Christmas tree?
Not exactly. I did get Sergeant Slaughter action figure the day before Christmas in the mail that I ordered like 6 months ago. So that was kind of cool.
That's good as.
2 days after Christmas, a customer came into my store and bought G.I. Joe, the complete collection hardcovers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow. I bet they were steel as well at cover price.
And that doesn't ever happen. No one really ever comes in and buys 5 hardcovers in a row all at once. And it certainly isn't something like G.I. Joe.
What was that collection, Tim?
These are the IDW. They're $49.99 or $49.95. They're IDW. Each hardcover the cover is a single color. Volume 1 was green. It just has the logo, and it reprints the Marvel run in chronological order. So after issue 50, it starts mixing in special missions, but it also includes the pack-in comics that were in between issues, like 34 and a half and 21 and a half. And Mark Bellomo put these together for IDW, so he has an introduction and notes in each issue, and there are some quote bonus features like scans of the toy vehicle blueprints.
Oh wow!
I think mixing in special missions chronologically is great. I think mixing in the 2008 or 2013. Like the new toy pack-in comics that Larry Hama wrote.
Right.
I think that's a nice idea, but I think those are so different that those actually really just want to be on their own, in their own collection.
Yeah.
Softcover or hardcover. And
yeah, I wouldn't want the 21B in there with the...
Yeah. Also,
with 21.
I don't think IDW had the original files for all these comics, so some of them are scanned from comics, so the reproduction's a little contrasty, and but also, and this is a topic for another day, but I don't love IDW's reproduction of Real American Hero from issue 51 and up. because looks like they scanned the original comics, stripped the color, and then redid the coloring. Whereas when Digital Chameleon did new separations to like redo the old coloring for like modern printing, but in the style of the original coloring for the first 50 issues for those 5 paperbacks that Marvel did around 2001, Digital Chameleon had access to the original negatives or files of the art. And so IDW is, if you're thinking of classic G.I. Joe soft covers, 1 through 5 to me look great, and 6 and up don't look as good. If you look at the lettering, sometimes it's kind of crunchy. Anyway, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Let's talk about Devil's Due 26.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read.
So this is, issue 26, January 2004 is the cover date. It is called Scott Sturgis is a Reasonable Man. The creative team are Story, Brandon Jerwa, Brandon Jerwa. Pencils, Tim Seeley. Inks, Cory Hamscher. Colours, Brett R. Smith. Letters, Dreamer Designs. Graphic design is Mike Norton, and military consultation is Andrew Swenson and Tilman Goins.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Tim Seeley, Andrew Pepoy, and Val Staples.
So I'm really torn on this cover because at first glance it's striking. It's a cool draw, some badass Joes just, standing there looking at you, and some have weapons and they're all determined. And there's no background, but that's okay because there's a, interesting color behind them that's a little unusual for G.I. Joe covers, or doesn't look like the last issue or two that preceded this. And there's a dramatic red underlight on all the Joes, which is pretty well done. But Tim Seeley's drawing, this doesn't look like a bunch of different characters cut out and pasted together. That's not really what I want to say. But there is a straight up and down quality to almost everyone on this cover. And by the time you look at Flint and Spirit all the way on the right, it feels like Seeley has just run out of ideas on how to give them anything interesting to do. And I don't mean like hold up a weapon or like hold up a fist. What I really mean is like do anything with their spine, with their rib cage, with their pose. And this is something that I see in Tim Seeley's art in issues we've talked about before and in this very issue. And so I don't want to just say like it's too stiff, because that's not quite what I mean, because there is some animation and movement in Tim Seeley's art, right? He's not an artist who, like, a complaint that I've had with other artists nowadays are like tracing 3D models of characters like in a program like Google SketchUp or Poser, right? Like this isn't that kind of stiff. There's no rhythm. There's no rhythm in this cover. Like you might sense a slight more element of rhythm to the cover if you were to take the back cover and fold it such that you could see the front and back together at the same time, Tim. Okay, so back cover and front cover side by side. Because the back cover is better, it diminishes what doesn't work about the front cover. But if I pick this up at a store when it comes out, they're not like folding the comic open. So it is the front cover that has to sell it. So I think of it this way. If this cover does not really pass the silhouette test, if you black in all the Joes and you just have black where they are and white where the negative space is, it's not a pleasing repetition of shapes. So there's a subtle lack of rhythm to these poses. So good cover, not a great cover.
What I was pointing was to, I guess, was the mirroring on the back cover of the Cobra characters against the GI Joe characters on the front cover. So you have, Storm Shadow being reverse of Snake Eyes, Cobra Commander being reverse of Duke, Baroness being the reverse of Scarlet, and so on. Which makes it for a slightly more interesting composition than perhaps just the two images taken in isolation. The other thing I wanted to call out about the sort of the look of this cover and the way it was drawn is that if you flip to the inside front cover on the credit page, it has just the black and white lines essentially of the cover without the colouring, and it's sort of looking at that image. It's quite striking how open Tim Seeley's style is, how sort of quite clean, crisp, without too many spotted blacks or sort of unnecessary cross hatching or noodling. There is there that, and the extent that he's then left it open for the colorist to, I guess, do more without making it too crowded.
I have long liked Val Staples' color work. Val Staples colored some of did he color some of Criminal? Val Staples was the original color artist on Brubaker and Phillips's Criminal.
Ah, okay.
And Val Staples colored some of the He-Man comics that he published. I'm blanking on the name of the company, but I do like the colors on this cover, and I would love it if Val Staples had colored this issue.
Yeah, we do have a credited colorist in this issue, Brett R. Smith, which I guess does make a change for the regular issue. Something else to note, I guess, that's striking and different about the front cover for this particular issue is the logo. It is the first issue with featuring the Devil's Due Production DDP logo as opposed to the Image logo. So this is post DDP setting themselves up as a publisher in their own right, and that the somewhat acrimonious split from Image and putting out the book themselves under their own logo.
Yeah, we can add a little bit more context here. Dreamwave had, am I remembering this correctly? Dreamwave had started publishing Transformers comics with Image and then left, and then Devil's Due. Am I remembering this correctly?
That sounds right.
Yeah, and so Image sort of had this 1-2 punch of a studio or production house setting up with and through Image, and Image would do the work, and then doesn't get any of the sort of market share if Dreamwave or then Devil's Due leaves. And Image is not about making money for what's called Image Central, the office in California where a handful of people, do sales and advertising and do the catalogs and do the website, right? If you're Josh Blaylock and you make money off of your G.I. Joe comic for 2 years selling it through Image, Eric Larson and Todd McFarlane and Jim Valentino don't take a cut of that, and there are no shareholders who take a cut of that. Your book makes you money at Image, and you pay a small flat fee to what's called Image Central so that it can keep chugging along and actually produce your book, actually print it. But there's still, you put a lot of effort if you're an Image Comics into welcoming some independent creators to publish through you, and if after 2 years they leave with some high-selling books, that's a disappointment.
I was just fact checking that in the background there. So Pat and his brother Roger Lee founded Dreamwave Productions in 1996 as an imprint under Image Comics, and Dreamwave split off from Image Comics in April 2002. So sometime before Devil's Due did the same. But yeah, post Dreamwave acquiring the Transformers license, which they did in December 2001. So in some ways, it's a sort of a launch issue, both in terms of having a new writer, but also while retaining the numbering, it is the first issue of the Devil's Due publishing logo view of the world. So they, want to make it accessible for new readers for that purpose, if nothing else. Okay, so we've looked at the front of the cover and who's doing it, but what happens on the inside? Hopefully, Jay will be able to tell us with a plot breakdown.
I'll do my best. As the Joes mourn their dead from the recent battle on Cobra Island, a new player enters the game. Journalist Scott Sturgis, who is trying to get to the truth of the return of the Joes and of their eternal adversaries, Cobra. One day, Sturgis is spotted spying on a group of Joes playing baseball in the desert, and a plan is put in motion by the Joes team's first sergeant, Duke. The next evening, after Sturgis has gone to bed, 2 men in Cobra Viper uniforms break into his house and inject him with a deadly contagion. The Cobras tell Sturgeon if he reveals the location of the Joe HQ, they'll give him the antidote. Suddenly, a group of Joes show up to rescue Sturgis and send the Cobras packing. The Joes take Sturgis to Duke, who tells him he will give him the antidote he needs in exchange for his cooperation. Sturgis asks, "What do I need to do?" Duke says, "Just listen," and proceeds to give Sturgis the Reader's Digest version of the Joes' conflict with Cobra, needlessly spotlighting a number of key Joes and their personal backstories. Afterward, Duke and Sturgis fly to Reykjavik, Iceland, where Duke sets Sturgis up in the Joes' Icelandic bureau as something with the new codename Scanner. Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Zaymont, have just made a deal with the U.S. military to retake control of Cobra Island.
Okay, thank you, Jay, for the plot breakdown. So, talking points for me, I think what I noticed was just it's one issue. It's, the regular number of pages, I think, but there just seemed to be a lot being fit into the issue. We had the kind of the wrap up / continuation of the previous arc, and we had it kind of acting as a jumping on point for new readers. We had this memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. We had a little game of softball. There was this Scott Sturgis investigation, little cutaway to a coil conflict in Badikistan and control of nuclear codes. We had that capture of Sturgis. We had the plotted summary of G.I. Joe and Cobra events and the cast. We had then this establishing Sturgis in the Iceland base, and then a final wrap up as well with Tomax and Zaymont with shenanigans with corrupt generals and manipulation of paperwork to gain control of Cobra Island. So quite a lot of things going on, a lot of characters, a lot of scenes in a fairly short amount of time, but it felt very peppy. It moved along at pace, but despite all of that stuff happening, didn't come across as being too crowded, which has tended to be the case when this has been attempted so far in the issues that we've been covering from Devil's Due. Did you guys kind of get that same impression?
I would agree that there is a lot, but not too much, and not at the expense of drama or action or setting up for whatever the next issue is. Mm-hmm. The things that I take issue with will sound familiar. It's like art or color or storytelling. It's not actual writing. Yeah, Jay?
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this issue. I mean, I was kind of excited going into it, being as I liked Brandon Jerwa's Frontline arc really well. I mean, this issue wasn't bad. It's kind of like you guys said, there's a lot there, but it's not like super packed. But I just don't know if I love the idea of the story. The Joes catching a journalist, and basically Duke tells him all kinds of stuff. And like I said in the plot breakdown, needlessly summarized various characters' stories. Like, he doesn't need to know anything about the ninjas and stuff. I understand that it's catching the readers up, but just internally, I feel like that wouldn't have happened.
Jay might be pulling me to his side. Maybe I'm so anxious to talk about art and color and storytelling that I forgot that I did find that 2-page spread of exposition uneven, where Duke's telling the journalist. So catching up the reader, lots of fun. Would this actually play out this way in the scene? Yeah, I do agree with Jay. So before I say firmly the writing is terrible in this issue because of that scene, That's a joke. I wouldn't phrase it that way. Can you guys remind me how much in the Devil's Due version of G.I. Joe is G.I. Joe known and public?
It seems to be pretty public. I mean, we had Flint writing a book in one of the issues.
Yeah, it's slightly inconsistent, I think.
Roadblock is a celebrity chef, so I mean, they're pretty.
But I mean, do we get any sense from, for example, Roadblock being a celebrity chef? It's not like he's talking about being a Joe. He's just like ex-military. You know, it's like when I read comic books published by DC, written by Tom King, right? Like Batman or Strange Adventures or Sheriff of Babylon. I know he was in the CIA in the real world. I don't mean in the story, but he's not like talking about what specifically he did in the CIA. So my sense with, I think, Mark's answer that it's inconsistent is that because this comic is half the continuity of the TV show mixed in with the Marvel continuity, and in the animation in the 80s, people sort of knew who G.I. Joe was, right? And and that was consistent because in the second miniseries in 1984 with the Weather Dominator, when Roadblock meets I forget her name, but she's blonde and she has a cowboy hat.
Honda Lou.
Thank you. Honda Lou. And they're in the back of a truck together, and doesn't he toss her an apple? And doesn't she say he's like, my name's Roadblock, I'm with G.I. Joe, and I'm here to stop Cobra. And she's like, a real G.I. Joe? It's like, no, I don't think you'd know what that is.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Joes are definitely public in the cartoon, because how many episodes did we see Cobra Commander would probably be like, surrender Joes, on national TV or something.
That's true.
I mean, it was always kind of a...
So, it's like the three of us know about the Green Berets and Delta Force and the Navy SEALs, but we don't know any of their names. We don't know where they go until missions are declassified. So, I think a rewrite of this scene, this 2-page spread where Duke is giving all this exposition to the journalist, is what's called for. I don't love the idea of him just saying, I'll tell you everything.
Yeah.
But Jerwa could win me over if he played it a certain way. And I don't think he quite played it that way. But because, Flint wrote a book, I sort of went with it.
Yeah. Yeah, if he would have just stuck to, more operational procedures, this is how we operate, this is what we do, rather than Snake Eyes is a ninja and he's part of this clan, and he left Scarlet at the altar. I couldn't believe he said that. That was the line that made me my mouth hit the floor. I was like, what? Duke just told this guy that Snake Eyes left his girlfriend at the altar, but he can't talk. And I'm like, shut up, Duke.
Yes, that line gets a big frown from me.
Maybe Duke's just a bit sore about it.
Least
because it's half the animation continuity and some version of this Duke. That scene, them bringing this journalist in and giving him and the reader the lay of the land, recalls a different G.I. Joe comic book from 2015. It's the issue of G.I. Joe published by IDW in the ongoing Real American Hero series. It's the regular monthly issue that did not have an issue number, and it was published between 219 and 220, and it was not double shipped. It was just like 1 month there was 219, the next month there was G.I. Joe Cobra World Order Prelude, and then the next month there was 220. And in that issue, I think it's Duke, not Hawk, but I could be wrong, gives is it Senator Wendy Lynn Torres?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Wendy Lynn Torres gives her a tour of the pit and lays out the whole conflict. And the reason why that works is because, A, as with this issue kicking off Jerwa's run, it's the prelude to a big story. But B, more importantly, she's a senator and she's allowed classified or top secret information. And so Jerwa is really leaning on the reader's acceptance and faith here of sort of the rules of this universe, where, like, what I did think was about to happen was that they were going to somehow make this guy work for them or be a Joe or do some intel for them. So to that extent, I like how they bring him in, and specifically with the two Vipers, I think that was clever and fun, and well set up and well followed through. And then like Iceland, like that's funny. The actual 2-page spread.
Yeah, I think as you've both said, it's the kind of talking about the Scarlet and Snake Eyes relationship is probably just slightly takes you out of it. It's just one thing too far in terms of the context of the scene and him briefing this guy about the G.I. Joe and Cobra conflict as a reader, having that, as a sort of being aware of that kind of interplay might be useful, but specifically for the breakdown of the G.I. Joe Cobra conflict, for a journalist snooping, perhaps not.
I'm still waiting for Devil's Due to give me a good Scarlet scene. I mean, we've had how many issues have we read, and just Scarlet's consistently. And I know she wasn't in that issue, but just having.
But she is on the cover.
That whole Snake Eyes left her at the altar. It's like, yeah, you had to bring that back. You had to
your favorite
just
bit.
Rub that rub that salt in that wound that everybody doesn't like. Just.
Jerwa's structure for this issue struck me as optimistic, that as a publishing initiative or as a writer decision, issue 26 was maybe, this is conjecture, was maybe a chance to get readers back who had fallen off during the previous 2 years. And I don't think in sort of the realities of like comic book sales that's likely to happen with a different writer who's mostly unknown and a different artist who's mostly unknown. Like if they'd gotten a very exciting, famous artist to start doing covers for issue 26, or, like a better known artist to do 26, or writer. And I'm not saying they should have. What I'm saying is this is written as a jumping on point. This isn't just, as Jay was saying, or I was saying sort of nebulously, to remind readers what's gone on. This is to show new readers what the status quo is, because Jerwa is going to take this in a different direction. Like some of the things that have happened, like Jerwa's going to do his own thing. And so part of why I mentioned this is that I don't remember having this specific thought at the time, but looking back, I can imagine I did. Like, oh, there's a new writer showing up. I bailed on this comic in the intervening 2 years. Maybe I should come back and give it another try. And this is where I feel like if we had like a fourth host of the show, that might be the person, like statistically. It's like Jay's reading these for the first time. I read some of them for the first time, but didn't continue. Mark read them, but doesn't remember them, so is rereading them. I feel like if we had a fourth regular cast member, statistically, that would be the share of the audience who would say, I wasn't into the end of the Blaylock run, but I did come back from 26, and this is what I think of it.
I don't know if it's a great jumping on point.
Yeah, as a jumping on point, I think what it's probably missing is just that extra bit of excitement. It feels like a sort of easing you in rather than a possibly how Hammer might, come at it, which is a kind of opening, page, bang, we're in the middle of a new story.
That's the thing.
And there is a bit of that with the coil, but it is. It's a more gradual transition rather than a kind of an explosive start, bang, you're in the middle of a new adventure.
What really works against it? We were saying, what it lacks is, it lacks action. And I thought, well, there is this scene in the middle of the book in Badikistan, I guess it is, where you have Claymore and Stalker. But for me, this sequence here is, it's just really ugly. I mean, the colors and the art are just horrendous. And starting with, I guess it'd be page 9, and this whole sequence overseas, it's raining, which, whatever, but the skies are just really dark. even when they get inside, it doesn't look good. It's
there are two threads that I want to follow from what we've just. Let me come back in a moment to Jay's comment about art and color and hover on story for a minute. The baseball scene immediately put me in mind of this wonderful convention that X-Men readers will recognize, which is that every couple of years, and it's happened 5 or 6 times in X-Men or Uncanny X-Men, the X-Men will play a baseball game after they've had some big deal mission or story. It happened in Uncanny 110. It happened in Annual 7, which was drawn by Michael Golden. It happened in 201. It happened in, I think, 325, which was not a Claremont story. Madureira drew it. So I think it was Scott Lobdell. And it happened when Claremont came back later in Uncanny 444. And those scenes may be shorter than I remember, but I feel like they're always like half the issue. And the G.I. Joe baseball game here, what it does is it, as a story device, it gives Scott Sturgis a reason to see the Joes outside when sort of he wouldn't likely see them outside, or they wouldn't be outside because their base is underground. So as a device, that works. In terms of what it does for the Joes, it doesn't really do anything. There's like 2 little jokes about, someone's good at baseball or someone's bad at baseball, but they're not talking about how this is a change of pace from this traumatic, exciting battle they just had. They're just sort of like doing exposition, like physical exposition for this reporter to see them. And so, comparing this to these 5 or so X-Men examples of baseball games, it doesn't compare favorably. And B, as a narrative device, it doesn't add much to the scene for the Joe's sake. To Jay's point about art and color, it does point out one thing about the color and one thing about the art.
We see devil's due colors distracting you. I see devil's due colors, light sources don't seem true, so Tim's not afraid to let them know. Devil's due colors are awful, like bad guano.
So on page 1, panel 1, right? You don't even have to count. I don't think colorist Brett R. Smith has a good handle on how light behaves. I think Brett R. Smith knows how to push things around in Photoshop because there are gradients and there are highlights and there are shadows and there's some effects, like the white lines of the raindrops hitting, or the black lines of the ink become white lines as well. Okay. In page 1, panel 1, look at the highlights on the backs of these soldiers' hats and shoulders. The highlights are pure white. What is happening on an overcast day when it's raining to create such a highlight? Like, generally, when it's, I'm looking out the window right now as I sit here saying these words, and the sky is like whitish light gray and it's just overcast, and things have cast shadows, but they're all diffuse, and like nothing has an extreme highlight. And if you need a G.I. Joe example, look at the funeral scene with Channing Tatum in G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, right? So this panel, this whole scene, most scenes in this comic are colored as if, and I've said this before, there's some invisible like light bulb like hanging 5 feet higher than everyone else in the scene, like just out of view for the reader outside the panel. It's like, no. There would not be these extreme gradients, these big changes from light to dark. In terms of art, this is a similar comment I made about the cover, but on page 5, the first panel, where we see Scott Sturgis, And he's got his glasses and he's looking left and he says, quit talking to yourself and go get the disc, Scott. It's not like they're just going to disappear. On its surface, this is a well-drawn panel, right? It's proportions and his hand, and there's background, there's foreground, there's background. But in terms of acting, I don't know what this expression, what this face, what this body language, what that hand says at all. Like, if you were to delete the word balloon here, nothing about this panel says to me, intrepid reporter talking to himself, or intrepid reporter stunned at his own good luck and journalistic expertise, right? It isn't even the like smirk on his face, although I don't quite understand the smirk, but like Tim Seeley's body language is often, it's like obvious. It's like someone is either doing something in action, they're running, they're shooting, they're punching, they're standing, like a cool Batman, Superman, superhero standing pose, like the cover, or they're sort of not doing anything. They're like kind of stiff, kind of straight. And I see that a lot. And some of this, I think, is this criticism I've levied before on Seeley, that I think he learned to draw a lot from looking at comics and less from looking at real things, like drawing people and trees and cars. And then some of it is also, practice. It's like you draw more comics, you tend to get better.
My comment on the art would be, I think that generally, I can see all the points you're making, and he's still relatively new in his career, but it's my takeaway from the art would be that it's not especially flashy. You wouldn't necessarily buy the book just on the for the art on its own if you take out the ingredients of G.I. Joe and the writing, but there's a lot going on. G.I. Joe is a bit difficult book to draw, as we've established multiple times already, and I think he's sort of quietly and simply doing the job, and hopefully as we progress over these issues, getting better at as he goes, and this this arc that we're the long arc that we're on, the era, I guess you'd call it, of issue 26 through to 43 is very much Brandon Jerwa and Tim Seeley doing the bulk of the art on those issues. So it is kind of hand in hand, Jerwa and Seeley era, and I think in terms of comics, it's sort of maybe not celebrated as much as it could be, but I think consistency of an artist does bring an awful lot to a book, and it's difficult to necessarily put a tangible kind of thing behind that, but in terms of just creating that body of work of the same creative team, and then sort of having an era of a book rather than just a couple of issues here, a couple of issues there, it does give a certain something, like the Wiggum, no, sort of like, let's say the Trimpe era, the Vosberg era, the Wiggum era, the Wagner era, etc. I think just having those long runs really does bring something to the book.
Yeah, Seeley isn't bad. I mean, if you look at that first page, like Tim was talking about, just imagine that without any of the color. It's like you pointed out with the inside front cover, how sparse Seeley's artwork really is. Now think about the funeral for General Flagg back in the original run. That was all just flat colors. Everything was open. Yeah, this one's in the rain. It's kind of a rainy day, but even if they had just stuck with more flat colors and not gone so dark on everything, it would have been way better to look at. I mean, this is just, it's like I said, it starts with this first page and it goes throughout. The art is just really, really hampered by this overcoloring.
I had two storytelling bumps that I wanted to point out at the end of page 8. So Scott Sturgis, there's a 6-panel page with almost no dialogue. He's driving. He's got his binoculars. We see the Joe pit entrance open. Close up on his binoculars, and then there's a POV shot, or in film what's called a matte shot, MATTE, where like you're seeing the like outline of binoculars or a telescope. So someone is looking at Scott Sturgis, right? And he says, he's saying to himself, "You want to proof, Scott?" And then, like over a radio, someone says, "So now what?" And then in the final panel of the page, it continues, "Is that him? We've never actually been introduced." And there's some mystery person who looks like a bad guy because they've got like super high-tech gear and we can't see any skin and the lights are red. So it doesn't look like a battle android trooper, but whoever this is, like, you know, sort of the rule for the Joes is that you can see who they are, and sort of the rule for the Cobras is that they have masks. So I don't know who this is, and I sort of lost the thread that they are the one looking at Scott Sturgis, because it sort of looks like in this panel they're looking down, like they're higher up. But in the previous panel, when we actually see what they see, they're looking straight on at Scott Sturgis. And then Jerwa's doing like a J cut, or maybe it's an L cut, where it's a film term where you hear the sound of the next scene while you're still seeing the like final moments of the current shot.
That's what I was going to ask you.
So like, is that him? We've never actually been introduced. So I sort of thought that the like, "Now what?" is like this guy with the baseball cap and the red night vision.
Yeah.
It's like someone's talking to him over his radio and he's looking at Scott Sturgis. But I think actually Jerwa has started the quote audio of the next scene so early. It's these Joes driving on this vehicle, Big Ben and Dodger in Badikistan. I actually find both this scene transition very confusing, because I was like, wait, who's talking? Where are we? And then the color, the actual palette, like the reds and blues that are chosen for both the Scott Sturgis scene and also the Badikistan scene are pretty similar. So I sort of thought that the scene ended with this final panel of Scott Sturgis in the scope, and then on the sixth panel of that left page, we are now cutting to this new location. And this guy with the baseball cap and the night vision goggles is looking at the Joes in the vehicle. Or maybe he's that guy in the background, like holding up the flashlight in silhouette. And they're driving past him, because Big Ben in that first panel of page 8 is pointing to the right. And he's like, someone's saying, "I'll let you know in a second." I found this confusing, and most of it I'm laying at the feet of Jerwa, who I don't think picked the right camera angles for the end of page 8. I think we're too close, and we need to see a panel where both the guy with the baseball cap and the night vision glasses, and also Scott Sturgis, we need to see both of them together in one panel. One can be far away, one can be higher than the other, one can be behind a rock or something, but the storytelling does not cement for me that they are in the same place. So I start to think they're not in the same place.
I think this could be fixed relatively easily. That you have, I think that guy with the binoculars is meant to be in the same scene. He's the guy looking at Scott Sturgis. Yeah. But then we've got the beginning of as Tim indicates, the beginning of the dialogue from the next scene. And I think if you just moved up the Digesta, capital city of Badistan, up into the top left-hand corner, just to set, we're in someplace new. Right. And then you began the dialogue, "Is that him? We've never been introduced." Because they're talking about Claymore, that they're trying to spot Claymore and they've never met him before. So that's what dialogue relates to. But yeah, it's unnecessarily confusing, and I think could be relatively fixed.
I think the problem is, like Tim said, it's a technique that is used in films, and in film it would work because we would see Scott Sturgis, in an open desert. You might see the other guy, but yeah, that dialogue could cut into the scene like that. But I think it just doesn't work for a comic.
Yeah, because you'd be able in cinema, you'd be able to hear the voice, and you'd be able to tell it's the same voice beginning now. That's in the continuing into the next scene, whereas we can't hear the voice, so we don't know if it's really the same or not.
It's more of an audio trick than a visual one. It doesn't work visually.
In defense of this technique for comics, I do want to say I see it a lot Peter David uses it regularly. I want to say John Byrne does too, but he hasn't been making like sort of regular comics for a while. But what Peter David often does when he uses it is there'll be a parallelism, there'll be a joke where whatever is happening on panel at the end of one scene, the like captioned audio dialogue that's starting the next scene sort of early is commenting on or reflecting on, or could also be what the person we see is still saying, even though the audio of the scene is like cutting ahead. So I don't think it's forbidden. I think what the rule that's broken here is that the audio starts 2 panels before the scene ends, not 1 panel. And then Mark makes a great point about just moving that caption up to the top of the panel. While I'm picking on this page, when we cut to Badhikstan, 1, 2, 3, 4, panel 4. That's Claymore. Better grab him quick before we get our butts DX'd by these coil buzz bores, though. Those are very strange looking buzz bores. Am I crazy? I don't quite know what that's the Cobra vehicle, right? Is that some new toy that I'm not remembering?
No, you're not crazy. They're just drawn bad.
Okay. Okay. So
that's all.
Okay.
That's all.
So I you know what? Like I've been hard on Tim Seeley for this issue and other issues, and actually this panel right here is like small potatoes for me, and I sort of don't mind compared to other stuff that I find more like primary. I think the problem here is, you know what? I'm going to lay this at Jerwa's feet. I think this page has too much happening in it, because it's got to introduce a vehicle, three Joes who we see, plus several more where maybe it's not important that we do. And they have to like get in and get out, or show up and leave. And then also 2 Cobra vehicles, which are really weird and like hard to draw. And also the buzzbore is sort of hard to draw if it's not moving, because if it's not moving, you don't see its blades, right? Like that's just like a blur or a whir. So I don't think Seeley left himself enough space to draw this very strange Cobra vehicle. And I don't think Jerwa gave Seeley enough sort of room to be able to draw all the stuff that this page required.
It's like the biggest threat on the page is the smallest element on the page. You know, it's like, we got to get out of here before the buzzbores come, and they're like these wee little tiny things.
So, okay, wait, just to be clear, that first panel on the top of page 9, is the guy on the left holding a rifle and in silhouette and like holding a flashlight? Is that Claymore?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and then in panel 1, 2, 3, we see in the foreground part of a leg and a fist. Is that Claymore?
Huh.
Or is that some like other soldier or like Cobra?
Yeah, that must be
Claymore.
Claymore. Yeah. So
Okay,
they've kind of driven slightly past him, and then he sort of must have run up and jumped up onto the back.
They swerved around because there are some curvy speed lines above Earth Street and above the vehicle. Oh, okay, I see.
Wow, that page is bad.
Okay, no, that it is him because that hand is holding the flare.
Yeah. It's got the same flare from the first panel.
Okay, but then what's the bright light in that next panel that's under the bore sound effect? Is that the flare?
I guess.
Okay, so listeners, if you're right now thinking like this is too nitpicky, I politely disagree. I think this is the interconnective tissue that makes a comic hum along. And it's like the difference between like driving a car that's been like recently tuned up or is brand new, and driving a car that has a rattle or like a little like bump, like, you know, as it goes, because there's some piece loose. It's like you're sort of distracted and the ride doesn't feel smooth.
I think that fourth panel is actually the buzzbores being shot at by mounted machine gun, so that the dots on the buzzbores are the bullets impacting it, and then the very last panel of it's driving away, and those 2 circles are the buzzbores flopping over in flames.
Oh, right. Okay, and then colorist Brett R. Smith, he turned the black lines of the rain white, which is okay. but he also turned the black lines of the right-mounted gun white, and he also turned the black lines of the buzzbores falling over white.
Yep.
So there are 3 different kinds of diagonal parallel lines inked in the background of this panel, and they all mean something different, but they're all treated the same way, which isn't clear.
Ah, well.
I also, if you turn the page, I'm going to jump ahead. I spy the Cobra Coil logo, I guess.
Yes.
That's so cool. What a smart bit of design, right? Like, it's just the right half of the Cobra insignia. Although maybe you're sort of seeing it from a profile because you've got
it's almost the right hand side of the Cobra logo, or like a 3D Cobra logo turned in on its side, right?
Yes.
It looks like the logo on the side of the hydrofoil on the bottom.
Yeah, okay. But would it be too on the nose if it was facing the other way so that it could look like the letter C? Okay. Also, all right, so I got really excited when I got to this page. First of all, like, hey everyone, Claymore's here. That's totally awesome. Like, I never bought Mission Brazil, Special Missions Brazil. What's it called?
I think it's called Special Missions Brazil.
Thank you. But the kid next door had it, and I somehow traded for or stole. I don't remember. But my brother and I should not have had Claymore because we didn't buy the box. But I had Claymore, and it was really cool because I sort of understood that parts of him were reused, but he was also a new color scheme and a new guy, and that's a cool name because I was also reading Marvel's The Nom at the time. Anyway. So, hey, awesome, Claymore's here. Like, Jerwa's bringing in obscure characters. That's really fun, because that's what G.I. Joe is, particularly if you've just retired some characters in the previous issue. So on this page, this is now page 10, Claymore and Stalker have some back and forth, and then there's this little inset panel, which I like, of Big Ben. My apologies, mates. I'm not even a Yankee, but that sight makes my stomach turn. I don't understand that line. It's kind of dumb. Sorry.
And also, why is Big Ben Australian?
I think I'm just lobbing you a softball, Mark. So
that should be your line, Mark. You read that line.
Mark, you did it.
Well, apologies, mates. I'm not even a Yankee, but even that sort makes my stomach turn. Mary Poppins.
Thank you. I'm sorry to everyone. Okay, so then so there's this building that looks like an embassy, and it's got this flag over it, and I think, cool. That's a cool visual. It's a cool little turn for the story. And then, well, they know we're coming. Might as well open up a 6-pack of hurt on them. And they're driving forward, right? Like, cool. And there's also 2 other Joe vehicles, which I didn't actually quite see in the first panel on this page. An All-Striker and something that looks like the All-Striker and the Arctic Blast had a baby, which is awesome.
Turn up! Fact-checking Joe here. The Joe vehicles in this scene are 2003 era vehicles. The Hammer-like Jeep is the Splitfire, and the All-Striker-like vehicle is the Desert Coyote. Back to the show, but Tim, you're gonna have to clean the barracks with a potato after. Fact-checking Joe, out!
And there's this big sound effect, right, which is fun. And then there's this person in a cloak and a masked uniform saying, "Cobra Elite, secure the embassy! They're wiping out a defensive line." So I sort of missed that there were a bunch of bad guy soldiers guarding this. You can see them in the previous panel, but it's an afterthought. And then the next panel, Stalker and Big Ben have already burst into the doorway and are coming at us down a hallway. And comics absolutely can and should do these little skips in time where, you know, like the next panel or the next page, it's like 30 feet to the west and like a full minute later. You don't have to show like all the Joes getting off of the hammer or whatever this is, and like walking through the door and going upstairs. But I did find this sort of too big a jump because it's like, wait, weren't there a bunch of coil soldiers? Like I was sort of expecting the next panel to be them shooting some coil soldiers or punching some coil soldiers or like running through a doorway and also knocking a Cobra coil soldier out while they're running through the doorway. So the coil guy says secure the embassy, but then on the next page there are no coil guys inside the embassy. So it seems like they've abandoned it, or the Joes made it to, like, I don't know, the third floor, which is empty. So then the dialogue comes in over like a radio, right? Like someone from headquarters is telling Stalker, your team is ordered to stand down and proceed to your pickup zone. The coil has taken control and are threatening unless you get out, right? So, and then the Joes in the final panel are sad. And it's like, sorry, it is not an honest, authentic acting sad. It's a like Tim Seeley abbreviation of like people stiffly like looking down, finger quotes, sad. I like the idea of this scene. It's like this like surprise, this turnaround, right? This thing that we see in the Marvel run where the Joes often get the shaft and they like, you know, they have a victory and then it's snatched from their hands because the bad guys outwit them, or some like government person betrays them. But something about how this scene is paced and it transitions from page 9 to 10, or something about it sort of confused me and didn't work for me.
Yeah, in my kind of original sort of top-down view, my main kind of negative for the issue was probably that you know there's a lot being fitted in here, but that there's not maybe enough of a G.I. Joe versus Cobra action beat, and possibly that, you know, middle missing page could have been that beat where there's just a little bit more action as the Joes are able to make their way into the embassy and try and find that space somewhere else, I guess.
Yeah, that's spot on. If there had been an added page between these two where the Joes are actually taking out some coil, yes.
It doesn't even need that. It could have been fixed with a caption. We could have just put a caption above Stalker that said shortly, you know, or soon. You know, the Joes,
yeah, but sometimes you need to see it, don't you? You need to see someone getting punched.
The whole sequence is the whole sequence is just I don't know, crammed in there.
So then we turn the page, and you guys know the toys better than me. So we see Wide Scope and Shockwave, and I'm having flashbacks to when Double Blast met Roadblock in an earlier issue, and the Devil's Due comic is commenting on or contending with the phenomenon in the middle 2000 aughts where Hasbro temporarily lost the rights to a code name, a trademark, and wanted to make a figure, and so made that figure again but gave it a different name. So like Baroness and help me out.
Chameleon.
Thank you. So I could be misremembering here or judging incorrectly based on this panel, but it sort of looks to me like at whatever point in the toy development process, Widescope was supposed to be Shockwave again, and they didn't use the name, and then they also gave him a dog? Or is this actually just a different guy who looks really similar, and then it's awkward because if you put them next to each other, it looks like that first thing.
Yeah, who knows for sure, but you'd think that Wide Scope was basically intended to be Shockwave, but you know,
is that a real figure?
It
Mark?
could, yeah, Wide Scope and his dog Lamont.
Oh, okay. So was it a Shockwave mold?
No, it was the new G.I. Joe versus Cobra or Venom versus Venom figure that just recently come out in this.
Like if you put all the G.I. Joe Arctic guys next to each other, they all do look similar and they all have a lot of overlap in their specialties. But if you put Flash and Sci-Fi next to each other, they look really different. Any version of those two characters. And so this sort of visual rhyming here, rather than being like fun or sort of an Easter egg, sticks out to me. I do think the Joes can have two SWAT guys, sure, but I think if the toys are going to look that similar to each other, the comic might wish to avoid having them right next to each other.
Yeah, they got half a dozen tripwires.
Green shirts. So yeah, I can see why Brandon Jerwa would have done it. You know, Shockwave is a very popular character. Widescope is a figure released as a new character with a new file name and a dog. And so if you've got two SWAT guys, you know, why not sort of team them up and have those specialities working together in tandem. Yeah, I guess it's not gonna please everybody, but I can kind of see follow the thought process behind it. It doesn't bother me. I think it's quite fun.
You know how I'm going to make this work for myself? When Night Force came out and my brother and I got to Toys R Us, I already had a repeater and my brother got the 2-pack that had Night Force repeater, and we decided that he was his brother. And he was also in the Joes, and we gave him a different name.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
I think if my brother and I had been at that age when this issue was coming out, when the Widescope figure came out, we would have sort of recognized that it's like, well, Widescope looks too much like Shockwave. Oh, that's because they're brothers. They're from the same. We sort of would have rewritten Widescope's file card. It's like, no, he's related.
You know, they always brought the new Joes in, and they were like, oh, people would feel like, oh, I don't want that character to replace this character. And I always thought, like, they're not replacing him. They're just a new Joe on the team. Because the way I looked at it was like think about like the Battle of Cobra Island, the original one. You'd have 5 or 6 different groups of Joes, you know? So, okay, one group has Roadblock, one group has Rock and Roll. One group has, you know, this kind of character, this kind, you know, it's like, yeah, we can definitely have these same characters.
Yeah. We need to go on a mission. It involves kicking open the front door. Oh, sorry, Shockwave's on another mission. We have to wait.
Jay, I like your logic, and this is always how I felt. I think there was a precedent that was set around issue, help me out, guys, 31 in the Marvel run, when there are some new Joes and some of the first and second year Joes get desk jobs.
Yeah.
Is there a party? And it's like,
yeah, it's a party at the bottom of the pit.
Yeah. And like CoverGirl and Flash or someone are like, well, I guess I got a desk job.
Yeah. It's all all your original 13 are given desk jobs except for Snake Eyes.
And I sort of remember some of the letters in the letters page were people writing in saying, hey, you don't have to do that. We're like, why are you doing that? So Jay, you make a great point, but a writer decision like back in 1984 made a certain sense of this ever expanding team that maybe like wouldn't really get that big. I want to point out something that I like about Jerwa and Seeley's decisions with Scott Sturgis. So he's this computer guy, and he's got a camera, and he mentions his like thumb drive or whatever, like filling up his disk with photos. And he's wearing a t-shirt that says "I'm online," right, which is funny and maybe a little cynical. But also the next scene after Widescope and Shockwave, Scott Sturgis is reading a paper book by candlelight. So there is this little contrast. There's a little added layer to his character where he also leads something of an analog life.
Huh.
I don't think he should fall asleep with a candle, with an open flame near his bed, but that does create a dramatic visual where the Viper can put out that flame by hand.
He better get used to reading alone. He's going to be up there in Iceland.
But it is an oddity, and I guess they must have worked backwards from that idea of a finger sort of putting out the candle was a cool visual, and working back from. Well, I guess if he does that, he's got to have a candle on, and why is that? But I don't know. With him being clearly quite into his tech, I don't know if it makes such enormous logic that he would shun electrical lighting. But one of my notes to my.
And he's a Steelers fan, so
one of my notes to myself was that there is a kind of a date stamp on this book in terms of the technology that Scott Sturgis is using. That he's got his digital camera, which is, I guess, still relatively new technology, which is full up with the massive number of 115 shots. And then he's also beavering away on his computer, which is a vintage iMac G3, which would have been, I guess, cutting tech at the time.
That was one of my I Spies, his iMac. So the bit a couple pages later where we find out who the two Vipers are, that's a lot of fun. And I thought the ending, both putting Scott Sturgis in Iceland is like fun and also makes sense. But I thought the final two bits of dialogue in that scene, okay, cool. So where do I get the jetpack and my laser rifle? Right. And I feel like you very sparingly should have two characters say the same thing at the same time. And because it sort of reads as a device and not natural. But also when it's as long as "Don't push your luck, Scott," I feel like that's more than those two people would have happened to say at the same time.
It's almost like the cartoon ending, though, isn't it? When you'd have that kind of slightly corny dialogue followed by forced laughter, and
the camera pulls back and they're all laughing.
We need a laugh track for this.
Like every single episode of Thundercats. And then, the final page I thought was an interesting subplot setup. And
what did we think about this way it's closing with him, with Scott Sturgis ending up in Iceland? So my take is that they've kind of invented an Iceland G.I. Joe bureau and created an office and stuck him there all on his own, basically to get him out of the way because he was being a nuisance.
I think. I don't know.
Is that your take?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. And that's why the story really doesn't work for me, because it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so you're bringing this guy in as a Joe now, but you're sticking him way out in the middle of nowhere to do what? It's like they didn't say, this is your position, this is what you're going to be doing. Duke just takes him there and says, you're going to be here. Did I miss something? Is there a line of dialogue where he says, you're going to be doing something? Or this is why we want you here?
Yeah, it says that he'll be watching satellite footage all day is the most tangible thing they say.
Yeah, okay.
I could go either way with where I think the story is suggesting Stuart Sturgis, Salvador Scott Sturgis is going to be. I think maybe he's going to show up again. Maybe he was really just written to be in this one issue as a character to bring the readers back to the story and to introduce stuff to lapsed readers. I think what Jay's getting at is that if there isn't more of a promise that he'll be in future stories, why spend any pages on him for this issue? It's not a strong enough device to recap what has happened and to tell readers sort of who's who and where's where. But G.I. Joe is such an ensemble book with so many characters who show up once and then come back several years later, when every writer who has dealt with G.I. Joe for a long period of time, because there are so many characters. So I'm okay with sort of not knowing. It's like, well, maybe Jerwa definitely wants to bring him back. Maybe Jerwa doesn't want to bring him back. Maybe Jerwa is creating him, and if he comes up with a good idea later on, might bring him back. I can certainly imagine if this book makes it to issue 50 and there being a double-sized fight in issue 50 where all the Joes go to some Cobra base or something, like a satellite, or back to Cobra Island. It's like there's going to be a page where they're calling Scott Sturgis, and they're like, we need you to reroute the laser from the satellite. He's like, okay, I'm at my computer in Iceland. So logically, I think Jay's right. If there isn't more of a promise for him to do something and really join the team, he should have had more of an integral connection to the story. It's like he should have been also uncovering something about Cobra that then benefits the Joes, or also in this issue, it turns out that he's a double agent and Cobra has been blackmailing him or something. Maybe it is missing one more connection or motivation, but on its surface, I'm okay with not knowing.
I don't know. It's kind of like in the old Bond movies when the villain would tell the bad guy their plan, and before they kill him or whatever, and give him enough time to escape. It's like, that's the way Duke's treating this guy. He's like, I'm going to tell you everything about our organization, including deeply personal secrets that are none of your business, and then I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna ship you to the top of the world. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's like I said, it's not a good jumping on point for me. We have to come back to this guy. I feel like at some point he's got to play a bigger part. Otherwise, this has just been a wasted issue.
We shall see. Harsh. So
I do want to say, actually, we didn't say it at the top of the recording. You know, we usually do these like 3 or 4 or 5 issue arcs in a single episode. And yes, this is a 1-issue story, so we can just do a single issue for this episode because we're doing the whole story. But I do think it's helpful, since there's a new writer and a new focus for the book for this episode, to just focus solely on 1 issue.
yes, indeed, and particularly with the kind of the density of what's going on. We shall see how it all pans out with the next issue. So 27, the next issue is another 1 issue, and quite a lot happens. So I think we'll just probably cover that on its own. After that, we get into a 5-parter called Players and Pawns. So I think we'll probably try and cover that in 2 parts, given that 5 parts is quite a lot to chew through in one go. So that will be preview of what is to come. Shall we get into I Spies?
I spy with my little eye.
I've got 2.
Go on, Tim. Let's start with one of yours.
On page 6, I spy Hector Ramirez.
Again. Yeah.
Who is not named. A different reporter is named. Someone named Tom is named in the scene. And then, this one's kind of embedded, you guys. On the opposite page, page 7, I spy a full 1-page ad for Rhino Home Video's DVD box set of G.I. Joe Season 1, Part 1, which I worked on.
Nice.
My name's on the back of the box as a special thanks. I was animation consultant for Rhino for a year or 2, and I worked on about 12 Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Beast Wars box sets.
Very cool.
Excellent.
I should note that these G.I. Joe and Transformers sets that Rhino did, the sound audio company that they subcontracted to added sound effects so they could get a Dolby 5.1 label, which greatly disappointed me and some other fans who noticed. And big shout out to Shout Factory several years later for fixing that mistake and some other errors when they did their G.I. Joe and Transformers DVD sets.
Very good.
Yeah, very cool.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you need both of those in your collection. One for the soundtrack and one for the extras, right, Tim?
I have both in my collection because the bonus features on the Rhino ones were good.
See, that's how they get you.
It's how they get you. Okay, what did I have? So I had I spy on page 1 the trope of watching a funeral at a distance in the rain. So it's Destro doing the watching the funeral from afar under the umbrella in the rain.
Yeah, you know what? We didn't talk about this scene as a writer decision, and I wanted to. Can I interrupt your giant list of I Spies just for a moment?
Yeah. Linger on this one. Why not?
In a sentence, Mark and Jay, what do you think of Destro and the Baroness showing up at this funeral?
I like it, except I don't like the way Destro's drawn. But I do like them showing up. I mean, Destro's been kind of an interesting character throughout the Devil's Due run, and I've complained about him before. I think that they've just made him really, really bloodthirsty in some respects, but they've also really ratcheted up his idea of, I think, honor and, respect. And there's been multiple scenes where he's talked about, having mutual respect for the Joes and stuff. So this is totally fitting with Destro's character, and also with the Baroness being like, why are we here? She's like, we don't need to be here. And he's like, we have to pay respect, And she's like, I'm going to be shooting all these people one day. She wants more funerals for the Joes is what she wants.
Tourist.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Jay. It's sort of like consistent with what we know of their characters, that they're sort of showing up to show respect there's some parallels to scenes in the Hammer era. So I'm fine with all of that. I was doing a quick Google of this, and one of the complaints on the message boards of the time was that someone complained the biggest gripe about this whole issue was that Destro unmasked was a white guy, and I was like, oh, come on. Really? Is this the first G.I. Joe book that you've read?
Is he white right there? That looks like, I don't know, like I've seen candy that's that color. I don't know what he's supposed to be.
I don't know what I'd describe that color as. Yeah.
Again, it's just the coloring in this book is, I feel like it's atrocious.
Metallic mahogany.
Yeah, it's like if he's going to be skin, he doesn't have a mask on. Just make him the same, more or less the same color as Baroness. I don't know why they colored his face like that.
Mark, what are some more of your I Spies?
Okay, I had an I Spy to the title, Scott Sturgis is a Reasonable Man. And I feel like that must be like hearkening back to some sort of quote of some description. I can't put my finger quite on what it is, but in law, a reasonable man is a phrase that is used to denote a hypothetical person in society who exercises average care, skill, and judgment in conduct, who serves as a comparative standard in determining liability. So that the lawyers would be arguing, what would a reasonable man be expected to do in this situation? And I've got a very favourite quote about the reasonable man, which doesn't necessarily make a huge amount of sense in this context, but I'll say it anyway just because I love it. It's from George Bernard Shaw, Man and Superman. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. Change happens because someone is not willing to play ball, essentially.
Play ball! You mean baseball at the pit?
Very interesting.
It could be. So we had some lesser known Joes. We had Hardball out there. So a first appearance of Hardball actually playing baseball in the comic, I believe.
Nice to see Hardball. I loved that figure when I was a kid. He was very well made figure.
Yeah. Good gun. We had Dodger, who's quite a fan favorite, and haven't seen a lot of in the comics since all of his teammates got wiped out in Trucial Abysma, wherever it was in that big oil refinery explosion. And Big Ben, who again is a fan favorite, we've not seen an awful lot of, and we've talked about Claymore, Wide Scope, and the Wide Scope and Lamont Easter egg that I noticed was that Wide Scope is speaking German to his dog, and I wondered at first whether that might be because the character was German on his file card, but he's not. But it is because police dogs are usually German Shepherd dogs, and they often come from Europe and are initially trained with German dog commands. So it's easier for the officer to learn a few German words than it is to retrain the dog with all new commands. Some people think that also it's less likely that you'd unintentionally have people saying commands for the dog to hear and obey. But generally I think they would obey their handler more than just a random stranger shouting kill at the dog anyway. So
okay, Mark, what's your next I Spy?
So we've got a new G.I. Joe location in the grand tradition of all of Larry Hammer's made up places. We've got and I keep on fluffing the pronunciation on this, Bad Hick Stan. One of you can try and pronounce it better than me. Jay had a more valiant attempt, I think, earlier on.
Badikstan, I think.
Badikstan. That sounds good. Badikstan. And then we had all of the names on the wall. I think I've got a jingle for name the Joes on the wall already. So
Here we go. Explain the wall. Chief's got to explain the wall. Do you think you know it all? It's not in Berlin or Hadrian's, the Great Wall of China. No, it's a wall that's memorial, not wailing no. Can Chief explain the war? Explain it.
And let's see if we can name the Joes. So
I think I can only do 2 of these. I fully admit Joe's real name's not my specialty.
okay, let's go with the ones that you could recognize.
Lawrence Flagg is definitely Shipwreck. No. And
Lawrence Flagg was one of them, honestly.
actually, that's the only one.
Phil Provost is Chuckles, isn't it?
Yeah. There you go. Chuckles.
And Carl Greer, wasn't that Grunt?
No, that was Doc.
Oh, okay.
So we've got Ian Costello, Avalanche, Brian Davis, Blaster, Blaine Gonsalves, Knockdown, Sherman Guderian, Heavy Metal, David McCarthy, Blocker, Blaine Parker, Mainframe, who I'd forgotten had died in that recent arc.
Oh, yeah.
Thomas Rossi, DJ, David Thomas, Crazy Legs. And then we had a couple of names that couldn't be matched. Mark Fruwith, Walter Rose, and Samuel Wells, possibly G.I. Joe fans or letter writers or friends of the writer, perhaps. And also conjecture they could also be green shirts that were just not named, or made up names for Mangler and Cool Breeze, who never got names, file names as well. And my final I Spy was Scott Sturgis. So I thought this must be a real life name. Let's have a look. The first hit was a news editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I thought, we've got a real life journalist. That must be him. And then second hit was Seattle musician, founder of such projects of Converter, Pain Station, and Alonus, the author of the post-industrialist album Shock Front. Given that he's a Seattle musician, the same hometown as Brandon Jerwa, I think that is our match, gentlemen. Also, photo reference. It looks to be a bald guy with stubble and boxy glasses. So I think he's our man.
I've got a little I Spy. In the middle of a book, there's a 1-page ad for Sound Blaster Audigy 2Z5 Gamer Limited Edition and GigaWorks S7500. And this ad always sort of puzzled me at the time because 1/4 of the ad is a slightly blurry action shot of a Jedi holding a double-bladed lightsaber, but with the blast helmet and the training orb that Luke Skywalker practices on in the first Star Wars.
Yep.
And I've always found this ad odd because 1, you don't see the Jedi's face, and 2, there's no Star Wars logo anywhere on this ad. So I always at first glance think that this computer company or this audio company is illegally swiping a Star Wars visual or doing something that looks like Star Wars but isn't quite Star Wars. But it has the Lucasfilm THX logo on the bottom, and Lucasfilm is in the indicia on the very bottom. But I think what I'm really saying is nowadays, if you had any kind of ad for any kind of product that involved Star Wars, whether it's candy or toy or video game, computer stuff, you would definitely have a Star Wars logo, and the Star Wars elements. I guess there's a very small Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy logo here. Anyway, this always has struck me as a sort of indirect and very odd ad. The last page of this comic is for the Wizard Fan Awards, and to determine what ranks as the best in the comics world from 2003. And this stuff always sort of bothers me and also delights me because it's such a time capsule, right? It's best writer, Bendis, Jeff Loeb, Mark Waid. This is where you vote. These are not the winners. And I was scanning this quickly to see if anything G.I. Joe came up, and G.I. Joe is in the running in 2 categories. Favorite supporting character. There's characters from Batman, Amazing Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, The Ultimates, and someone you may have heard of in G.I. Joe named Snake Eyes. And then favorite miniseries. You can vote for 1602, which is the Neil Gaiman like colonial Marvel story. JLA Avengers, the company crossover. Superman Red Sun, Ultimate 6, which is a Spider-Man story, and Transformers G.I. Joe. Eagle Eye fans will note that Transformers G.I. Joe is the Dreamwave story because wasn't the Devil's Due one G.I. Joe Transformers?
Yeah, that's right.
And then the 2 pages before this are full page ads for 88 MPH Studios, which it's not clear what these ads are for, but one has a drawing of a new character from the world of Tron, and the other one has a drawing of Slimer. But these are both like comic book drawings. These are not like movie poster photos or airbrushed. These aren't like photos for action figures or video games. This is definitely some kind of comic or like book that looks like comics. And there was a Tron comics graphic novel sequel that came out in like 2008 that is not at all, or 2006 or something, that's not at all related to Tron Legacy or the cartoon that was on Disney XD. And I don't know that this Ghostbusters thing, whatever it was, ever happened. And I'm sort of asking this as a question because maybe you two guys know. Is 88 Miles Per Hour Studio, are these two projects at all related to that Transformers art book Genesis, which came out? I
wouldn't have any idea.
That
Image.
Idea. There was a hardcover Transformers art book called Genesis: The Art of Transformers, Volume 1. It was published by Image. This is in the era when, for a couple years, every Image book had a yellow rectangle on the top of the spine, and it said in black letters, Image. And it was supposed to be like all development art from the Transformers toy line. And it wasn't a Kickstarter, but it was some early thing where I think you could prepay. And by the time it came out, it was like mostly just pinups, like new Transformers art from fans. And it was pretty good. And I sort of remember 88 Miles Per Hour Studio was involved in that. But you know, Tron, Ghostbusters in like 2003, 2004, someone trying to license that stuff is jumping on the same curve as Dreamwave with Transformers and Devil's Due with G.I. Joe and Voltron and Micronauts. But maybe too early, or sort of those two brands, Tron and Ghostbusters, not popular enough to like make a splash.
I was just Googling to have a look about 88 Miles Per Hour Studio. So 88 Miles Per Hour is obviously a reference back to the Future. So another 80s property.
Oh yeah.
They announced a Tron comic book series in June 2003, which was going to be a continuation of the 1982 film. And they also announced a Ghostbusters project as well. So actually, it looks like that one actually happened. Ghostbusters Legion was a 2004 comic book series published by Quebec-based publisher 88 Miles Per Hour Studios. So Andrew Dabb and Steve Kurth
drew it. Oh, cool. Yes, I have confirmation from the internet that 88 Miles Per Hour Studios did publish through Image Genesis: The Art of Transformers, this coffee table book.
Aha.
My final I Spy is the inside back cover of this comic book, which advertises G.I. Joe Reborn, which is the comic that sort of replaces Frontline.
Ah.
This is when Devil's Due, 2 years into its G.I. Joe era, tries an ultimate G.I. Joe, that the way that, you know, Marvel had regular Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man, like a newer continuity that it started over, and G.I. Joe Reborn is the name of it's basically like a zero issue, right?
Yeah,
and it kicks off what became G.I. Joe Reloaded. But confusingly, it had 2 zero issues or 2 number 1 issues.
Yeah, there was a G.I. Joe Reborn and a Cobra Reborn, I think.
Right, thank you.
Next issue.
So this image on the inside back cover is a Tim Bradstreet drawing, and his are all very carefully photo referenced.
Yeah.
Of Snake Eyes holding his Uzi and his sword in a like underground, like brick tunnel, and with a distressed military stencil treatment for the word G.I. Joe Reborn. And John Nayreiber, who had written the World War II era Dreamwave Transformers G.I. Joe crossover, and with art by Joe Bennett, who was bouncing back and forth between Marvel and I want to say Extreme Studios. I think Joe Bennett did a bunch of the like Alan Moore Supreme, I think.
Right.
I think so.
So if you saw this ad at this time, I think it's both very exciting because it's Devil's Due, like trying something big with some different talent, some more like name marquee talent from the world of comics than a Jerwa or a Seeley, and like pushing a G.I. Joe book. Very exciting, but maybe worrisome.
Yeah, but also the Tim Bradstreet sort of illustration being super cool and suggesting something,
That's an awesome
undertones from being carried across from his Punisher work and that kind of thing, of it being, this is going to be something different and grittier, more movie-like, more serious, different kind. This isn't your mama's G.I. Joe or whatever.
Yes, thank you for adding that. But also for a reader at the time, maybe in the back of your mind, a little worrisome, because it's like, wait, is something wrong with regular G.I. Joe that 2 years in you have to start another G.I. Joe?
And it's worth. I'm glad you brought this up, because it was something that sort of Joe was sort of mentioned in the background as well. That Devil's Due's sort of focus sort of slightly moves away from the main book of G.I. Joe in the ARA continuity and onto this G.I. Joe Reborn continuity of they hope that this is going to be their big success. And it's going to be their big G.I. Joe book, and potentially big enough that they can use that as their flagship and quietly drop the main book. So yeah, a good reminder that this is that kind of era in the background of it. This is just being relaunched, and we're having these two simultaneous continuities happening. Yeah, maybe we'll do a one-off special look at the G.I. Joe Reborn era or something like that. Dip our toes in and have a discussion about it.
Cool. I have an I Spy. You guys probably can't see it very well, but can you read any of the titles on the bookshelf on page 6? I can, because I'm looking at it on my computer monitor. I've got, I can read Disneyland of the, I think it says 60s, which I'm not sure what that book is. Orion Mystery, which is by Robert Bouval, which is a kind of a ancient aliens type thing. There was one since Conspiracy. Then there's a book by David Icke, who's completely, conspiracy, tinfoil hat. Of course, he's got a JFK book on the shelf, and I think on top of the TV, that book says Illuminati. So our journalist here is a big conspiracy guy.
Is one of them called Black Helicopters?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
All pointing towards him being a big conspiracy guy. Yeah.
I think it's funny if you look down. For me, I'm scrolling down on the on his corkboard. The one thing says "crazy dentist on the loose," and of course, Dr. Mindbender, experimented on himself, and he was a dentist before he became a mad scientist. So that is obviously referencing Dr. Mindbender.
Very good. Normally we would get to error detected. Do we have errors to flag here?
I don't really see any glaring errors. No, I mean,
no.
Very good. That's a tick in the box for the team.
Quote of the week. 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 Quote of the week.
Favorite line of dialogue. I've got my favorite line of dialogue, which might be Tim's least favorite line of dialogue. Let's see. It's Duke and Scott. Scott, my name is Duke. I'm the commander of the G.I. Joe team, answerable only to the man we call General Tomahawk, Hawk for short. Do you know what my favorite thing about this job is? Women want you and men want to be you. No, those are perks. My favorite part of the job is making problems go away.
That was a good line.
Yeah, I didn't mind that. Nothing jumped out at me as a favorite line, but I don't say that as a criticism.
Yeah, probably if I had a favorite line, it would have been that one right there. But I really, like Tim said, nothing jumped out at me. Not as much as the least favorite line of dialogue, which is Duke talking to Sturgis about Snake Eyes and Scarlet.
Who is the MVP? Most valuable person in these issues.
Okay, we've not done this for a while. Let's do an MVP. Who was your favorite inclusion in this issue? I think for me, just having Claymore, it's just as a cool piece of fan service of this unknown character, and just a bit of a blank slate, being able to set up a cool new character and allow that to be part of the team making their stamp on the book with a new character. What about you guys? Who was either your favorite character on the issue or just a nice inclusion that you were glad showed up?
I'll go with Claymore. I'm like Tim. I didn't have that set, but somehow I ended up with the Claymore figure, and I did think that he was really cool.
Did you also steal him from my next door neighbor?
Probably not from your next door neighbor.
Someone's next door neighbor.
But I did think that was a cool figure, so it's neat to see a figure like that in a book. Like we said when we were talking to Brandon about that stuff, seeing the new characters in there just makes the characters real for you. It's like that's when they become part of what I refer to as your headcanon. That's why for me, like, so many characters that appeared in A-Raw after issue 100 are just kind of like, whatever. I don't really have any, those characters don't mean anything to me because I didn't read that. But when they show up in a book like this, you're like, oh yeah, Crosshair's he's a new Joe now. And this guy's a new Joe, or still holding out judgment on Spider Jerusalem here.
I was also excited to see Claymore. Just to toss in a different answer, I like the inclusion of Destro.
Yeah, it's a good call.
Very good. Okay, so Joeage time. Jay, why don't you start off today?
Okay. Like I said, and I've been kind of hard on it throughout, this has not been one of my favorite issues. I don't feel like it's a great starting on point for anybody if that was the intention. To me, it would be a good, a good first part of an arc, or something that, is going to lead to a bigger thing. So we just kind of have to wait and see. Like I said, I have issues with how the story goes down in a couple spots. Mostly it was just, Duke revealing too much personal information to somebody that's, nobody. So that was a problem. But it's nice to see, Brandon back. Tim Seeley's getting a little better. It's not a great issue. The coloring is really, really bad for me. 5.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly no higher than that.
Okay, I think it's a difficult issue because it's meant to be, much like that the Hammer written prologue issue that we saw in recent years from IDW. These kind of almost placeholder entry in kind of let's review the world through a new character's eyes. It's a difficult issue to carry off in terms of making it a true wow issue. If you're kind of slightly easing people in, that's going to be a difficult thing to accomplish. But I think I like the art. I thought it did the job. I thought that there were an enormous amount of moving pieces being covered within just a single issue, which is really difficult to pull off well. And I think they really did do that well. I think with a couple of those beats sort of changing that we'd talked about, maybe just a kind of a little bit more action, it would have elevated it for me. But for what it is, I did like it. And kind of, again, as that intro issue, it does set up an expectation of like, okay, we've got that kind of intro out the way. What's going to happen next with the main meat of the story? So I am looking forward to the next issue. But in and of itself, solid. but not classic 7.
You guys said everything I would say. It's not bad. It's okay. It's enjoyable. It's got problems. 5.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. So that is issue 26 done. I did have a new segment to just trail, and you guys have had a little bit of a preview of it. So it is G.I. Joe Origins, and in this segment, it's essentially one of us will pitch a G.I. Joe Origins style trailer, as if we're execs crafting our own little teaser trailer about the G.I. Joe origin of a much-loved character, but with very little research or authenticity to comics, toys, and file cards. So hopefully you get the gist of what this is all about. And to illustrate it, here's the first one I came up with. It's G.I. Joe Origins Cutter. Have to lead with one of the main characters, of course. So that's what I did.
Talking Joe presents G.I. Joe Origins.
I'm on a new level. I'm on a new level.
G.I. Joe Origins. Cutter. Growing up in San Diego next to SeaWorld, young boy Skip A. Stone had a view of the orca tank from his bedroom window. He had just 2 dreams of what he might be when he grew up: to play for the local team, the Boston Yankees, or to be a killer whale fish, just like his neighbor, Shamu. When the school career guidance counselor said that neither of these things could possibly happen, he decided to prove them wrong. After graduating and taking the summer off to coach the women's swimming team in an episode of his life he just calls his long wet summer, he went on to specialize in biorobotics and create a fleet of killer orca cyborgs. He called them Wet Hydraulic Aquatic Launchers Enhanced, aka whales. This caught the attention of the G.I. Joe team, and they immediately offered him the role of whale captain. Yo-Joe!
You didn't hear me chuckle just now because I chuckled yesterday when I watched it, listened to it. It's great, and it flexes a different muscle for you, which is this like exaggeration, like it's not just rhyming lyrics for one of our guests, but it's like making fun of movie tropes and doing these silly exaggerations of Joe's. So good job, sir.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was very funny.
Thank you. So hopefully this can be some sort of regular continuing feature. I've got a couple more sort of mentally queued up that I need to write something for and record. But please, if you've got your own ideas about a G.I. Joe character that you would like to have an origin film trailer for, please do come up with your own, and we'll record them on a future episode. And this is open up to the listeners as well. So if you've got an itch to write a little G.I. Joe movie trailer, less than a minute long, you can write it and email it to us, or even record it and send that on. Look forward to seeing what we all come up with. But I think that is us done talking Joe this time round. Next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we will continue our look at the Brandon Jerwa era of G.I. Joe with the next issue 27, which is ostensibly a one-parter, but in the ongoing saga, this one is called Paradigm Shift, which for a long time I used to think would have been pronounced Paradigm. And then as we progress, we'll probably carve up the arcs a little bit. Over on the regular show, we recently spoke to artist Cuba Ball about his spotlight issue on Falcon, which was issue 288. We will have our regular review show of that, either coming out soon or just last time. Also coming up will be issue 289, which is all about Dawn and Helix. It's interesting to see these spotlight issues and what sort of ground they cover, whether it's part of the ongoing saga or, slightly to the side or what. It's a bit unpredictable as to how the story's going to turn out.
Always interesting to see Helix too in the A-Raw universe.
Yeah, sort of came in a little while ago as a bit of a from left side, really, given that she was so firmly tied to the Chuck Dixon verse of continuity of IDW. So, Tim, where can people find you when you are not talking Joe with me and Jay?
Hubcomics.com is the website for my store, and a realamericanbook.com is my G.I. Joe blog.
I see a lot of people on Facebook saying, oh, where can I find these G.I. Joe back issues? And I mentally think to myself, well, if you drove to Somerville and tracked down Hub Comics, I'm sure you would find a treasure trove, such as the lucky person who was able to pick up 5 hard to find G.I. Joe hardcovers from IDW.
It's amazing that you had all 5 of them. Usually you see something like that, you'll see like one volume out of 5 or something.
I take my G.I. Joe inventory seriously. Actually, someone yesterday was in the shop, a trio, and one of them went over to Sci-Fi and gasped and said, I've never seen so many Transformers collections at a store.
Oh, wow.
Because we have not the complete run, but almost the complete run of the main IDW continuity. So I also take my Transformers inventory seriously.
Excellent.
That's got to be a lot of books, because they've put out a lot of Transformers comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you think it's only so many, but there is more than meets the eye. Jay, where can people find you when me and Tim aren't talking about you?
Break Room Sketches on Facebook.
Excellent. You can find us in the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website with links to those places. I've just this week done some editing of that main page and moved some of the videos around to put some of my newer favourite videos as a spotlight, and I've added in a couple of Twitter quotes in there as well from our guests, so looking refreshed. We've also got a Facebook page with lively discussions happening there, Twitter, Instagram, and you can always find us on email as well as on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe, where people can back us and support us and keep the lights on the website and all of our recording subscriptions. So big thank you to Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher and Justin, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as a Ready Breck style glow for the good work they are doing supporting us. Phew! So that's us done. But remember,
Nobody beats Talking Joe.
A real American podcast.
with a guy from England. Later, Mary Poppins. Bollocks.
Wankers.
He did say bollocks in the issue. We didn't talk about that.
Yes, he did.